Badass of the Week is an iHeartRadio podcast produced by High Five Content.
Atop the Janiculum Hill in Rome, there stands a large statue. It's a woman rearing up on her horse, long hair flowing behind her. She's holding her 12-day-old infant son in one arm and her pistol in the other. It's a bronze statue by the famous sculptor Mario Rutelli. Though it is quite large and dominates the square, in Rutelli's original design, it was 3 times as large. It stands on a site where Anita Garibaldi led the defense of Rome against an invading French army, driving off the attackers. It is also her tomb. When the monument was inaugurated in 1932, her body was carried there by veteran soldiers who served under her command.
Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, Dr. Pat Larish. Pat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, and I am eager to hear the rest of the story of Anita Garibaldi.
Yes. So, Pat, maybe do you want to how do you remember what happened last week? Maybe we should recap the previous
let's
episode.
recap. Yeah. So this is Anita Garibaldi. She's this 18-year-old Brazilian woman in the 19th century. And this guy shows up, Giuseppe Garibaldi. He's this Italian guy. She finds him intriguing. He's interested in fighting for freedom. He's cool. She likes him. And she's got a lot of energy and she's got a lot of drive. And so she joins him on the front lines of this fight for freedom. You know, this part of Brazil is fighting for freedom from the Brazilian Empire. One thing leads to another, and she is fighting. She's separating from Giuseppe. And so Anita actually is captured by the enemy. She's captured by the enemy and she's a prisoner, but she says, her captors say, Giuseppe, we received a report that he's dead. And she's saying, oh dear, my husband, I can't leave him. I have to go find him and bury him properly. You know what? That works. They let her go. She goes out. Now, she's also a few months pregnant. I'm not sure how many months, but, she goes out. She looks for him. She doesn't find him. She steals a horse. She escapes. The horse, something's wrong with the horse. The horse throws her. Okay. But
the horse is shot. The Empire shoots the horse.
Okay, yeah. So she's thrown, but she makes it. She survives in the forest for 4 days. And finally, she's reunited with Giuseppe. And they're in a safe house. But is the house really safe? Okay, safe enough for her to give birth to their son. But
they're rebels who are staying in the same place for too long. And, Empire gets word and they get surrounded. Yeah, so she is a freedom fighter who is now in big trouble. She's surrounded. Mm-hmm. You had said there was kind of Bonnie and Clyde vibes with Medea
and Jason.
And Jason, but I get that from this too, right? Like we're surrounded by the federales and
yeah, but I want to say with Medea and Jason, especially with Medea is really and truly a villain. Like she's a grade A villain, and Anita and Giuseppe, they're fighting for a cause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That is very true. So they are surrounded by the Brazilian troops. But then, like we did in the cold open, that night, they ride out there with the gun in one hand and the baby in the other, and they break through the surrounding forces and they escape. They get away.
Yes.
And they retreat back to Brazilian lines and they rejoin the revolution. But here's the problem. So they've escaped. They've rejoined the revolution. They're freedom fighters. They're here to fight for the freedom of Rio Grande do Sul, which is a state in the southern part of Brazil. It broke away. But at that Battle of Cortichibanos, it was a big battle. It was more than just Giuseppe. He's got his guys. Giuseppe and Anita, they have their guys. They do these guerrilla raids. They do some pirating kind of stuff. But the rest of the war is going badly for the rebels. And when at some point in the next couple of months, they dismiss Giuseppe Garibaldi. They're like, we can't sustain this war. We're going to do something else. Thank you for your service. They give him 900 cows as a reward for his service. And they tell him that, okay, this is it.
So I'm doing the math here. So that means 900 cows. That means he can transport 4.5 ships, if we think back to the number of bovines who were pulling the ships that he and his...
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, 900 cattle. Okay, that's a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
And especially among gauchos, among Brazilian gauchos.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? He was a war hero, right? He was the most successful general that they had. He was a big hero. He wasn't the most, but he was one of the most successful generals that they had, and he was a big hero in Brazil. But the war is going to be over. We're going to lose. We're probably going to lose. You should get out of here. So he's Giuseppe Garibaldi. He's got Anita Ribeiro with him. He's got a 1-year-old son. War's over. He's in Brazil, which is a place he's never lived before. And his side's probably going to lose the war, and he's probably going to get in trouble. So what do you do? And you got 900 cows.
Okay. So what would I do? That's one question. But then with 900 cows, I mean, I don't know. Would I try to cross the border into another part of the continent and take my cows with me and, I don't know, become a farmer / rancher or something? Well,
it just so happens that Anita Garibaldi is a skilled cattle driver and
that's
rancher.
Right. Yeah, she's a total cowgirl.
She's a cowgirl, yeah.
She's a gaucho, yeah.
So these three, because we've got the 1-year-old now.
We've got, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was very bold for taking a 1-year-old on an airplane from Seattle to southern Brazil. But what they do is they drive a herd of 900 cattle 700 miles south to Montevideo, Uruguay in 1841.
Oh, okay. With a 1-year-old.
Right. Across mountains, plains, all this stuff. I imagine they probably had some help with them, some former soldiers or whatever. But
still, this is a non-trivial undertaking.
They ride a horse 700 miles, and there's a mountain range in between these kind of places.
Yeah. And you take breaks from time to time, but still you have to get back on the horse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they go to Uruguay. Uruguay, I think I mentioned that the gauchos in southern Brazil were trying to break away, but they have a lot of kinship with Argentina and Uruguay at the time. And Uruguay had actually been helping support the gauchos. They were sending weapons and money because they liked the idea that Rio Grande do Sul would break away and become friends with Uruguay, or maybe even become part of Uruguay someday. So they were on kind of good terms with Garibaldi's army. So he's like, we'll go there. So they drive the cows down there. They don't do much with the cows once they get there. They're not farm hand kind of people. They're not retired to a ranch. This was an awesome opportunity for Anita and Giuseppe to retire to a nice ranch somewhere and grow old. And 900 cows, you're pretty much set. You can, make some sort of, you can turn that into something that you could do for the rest of your life, right?
Exactly. Yes.
But that's not their plan.
I suspect, no, that's some alternate timeline. What happens in this timeline?
Well, Uruguay is having a little bit of domestic problems of their own. And Giuseppe and Anita, I don't know whether they sell the cows. I don't know what they do with the cows. The cows are no longer in the story at this point, and they're gone. Something happens to the cows. They are madly in love. They get married in Montevideo. They get married on a boat.
So they make it official.
Yes. Anita Ribeiro Garibaldi. And they have like 3 more kids while they're living there. But then, there's this war brewing in Uruguay, and it finally breaks out while they're there. or like around the time they're there, maybe a little before. In Uruguay, they call it the Grande Guerra, which is like the big war. It's the civil war of Uruguay. It's split between it's a succession war. But there's the guys in Montevideo, and the rebels are backed by Argentina. So the war goes kind of back and forth, but in 1843, Montevideo comes under siege, and Giuseppe and Anita are living there with their 4 kids. And
huge family, yeah.
What happens while they're there? It's called the Great Siege of Montevideo. It is a
siege. Ooh.
A siege, yes. The Argentinians and the rebel Uruguayans surround Montevideo by land. They dig trenches, they dig fortifications, they cut it off from land access to the rest of the country. It will remain that way for almost 8 years. It will be under siege.
8 years?
Yes. The Great Siege of Montevideo lasts for 8 years.
8 years, okay.
Yes. Now, how does it sustain that? Like, there's no land access. You're under siege. Like, this is not a very effective siege if it's going to go on for 8 years. They're launching attacks here and there, but they can't. The rebels surround the city, and they can't penetrate the defenses, and they just cannot seem to starve the city into submission. And one of the reasons they can't is because the Uruguayan president in town is like, Giuseppe Garibaldi, you are a dude with some naval military experience, some sailing experience, a letter of marque, a former pirate-y kind of guy. I need you to keep the water access to our city open.
Right, because if you're being besieged by land, land is not the only way of gaining access to stuff. Okay. So Giuseppe Garibaldi, who is, cough, cough, technically not a pirate.
So he's put in charge of the Uruguayan fleet. And him and Anita start sailing around. Like, he's officially put in charge, like, they give him command of the Uruguayan Navy.
Okay, so he's a dude who is originally from Italy, and all of a sudden, okay, hey, he's in charge of the Uruguayan fleet.
He's the commander of the Uruguayan Navy. A country he had never been to before less than a year ago. But now he's commanding the Navy, and him and Anita are out there. And they are, and it turns out that Montevideo at the time had a lot of expats from different European countries. So they together are able to rally support from some British and some French and some Italians. He creates what's called the Italian Legion. He organizes them into groups based on where their home countries were. So there's a British Legion, there's a French Legion, there's an Italian Legion that he and Anita command. And then he gets the Navy involved, and he starts sending letters back to those.
So you say Anita commands, like, so she's
with him every step of the way along the way. She doesn't leave his side for any of his battles, right? She has naval combat experience, right? And she's there on these battles. They are able to get outside help from those countries, from Italy and France and Britain, send aid via boat, and these two, they command the fleet, and they keep the port open, right? Anytime the Argentinians or the rebels try to close off the port, they have to get through the Garibaldi Navy, and they can't do it. On land, they're also launching attacks. So they had kind of had this strategy of attacking. They had these cavalry charges they would do and things like that. These guerrilla fights, and they're kind of harassing the besieging troops, also trying to keep them on their toes. So the besieging troops are there's a little bit fewer of them than there are people in the city. So they really can't attack the city. They'll lose. So they're just camped out there. And so he'll show up. Him and Anita will lead little groups of gaucho style cavalry out there to like mess with, like, do some raids and break some stuff and then run away, that kind of stuff. So here's the thing. In 1845, so remember, this siege goes on for 8 years. It starts in 1843. And so for the next several years, they're doing this kind of stuff. In 1845, news comes from Brazil. The way it's put, and the way you will always see it put, is that the Empire of Brazil finally quelled the rebellion in Rio Grande do Sul.
And that's their version of the story?
It is. It's the version you see everywhere, but I don't really think it's a great way of explaining the end of this ragamuffin story we were talking about last time.
Okay.
So if you'll remember, I'll kind of recap for a second that the most furthest southern state in Brazil seceded from the Brazilian Empire because the Brazilian Empire wasn't taking care of them. It was, I called it a beef jerky war because they were making it so it was cheaper to buy beef jerky from places other than Rio Grande do Sul.
Yeah, which seems like a jerk move.
But they rebel and they're fighting against, and so eventually the empire sends a guy named Luis Alves de Lima e Silva, the Duke of Caxias, and they call him the Iron Duke. He's the greatest war hero in Brazilian history. He's the guy I'm going to talk about.
Okay,
the Iron Duke. Yeah, he's awesome, and I'm going to talk about him a bunch. We're going to do an episode on him in the future, but I just want to have him be a little. I want to mention him here because he goes down there with the Brazilian army, but he doesn't just kind of stomp everyone. He goes down there and he decides he's gonna, the rebels were losing, and that's why they sent Garibaldi away, and they knew they were gonna lose. The Iron Duke shows up down there. He's already a big war hero in Brazil with this big army, and he goes down there and he offers a treaty before he attacks.
So he could have pounded them, but he says, "Hey."
But he didn't.
Let's use our words.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the Tratado de Poncho Verde, the Treaty of the Green Poncho. And remember, gauchos are famous for their ponchos.
Yeah.
So the Brazilian Empire will reabsorb the Republic of Rio Grande do Sul. It will come back into the Brazilian Empire. In exchange, the Republic or the Empire will grant amnesty to all of the rebel soldiers who fought against them, will pay off all of the Republic's debts in Rio Grande do Sul, and institute a huge tariff on imported beef jerky so that people will have to buy the Rio Grande do Sul jerky, and give the people of Rio Grande do Sul full autonomy in voting their own political leadership. That is like, there's like a Senate underneath the emperor, and instead of that being an appointed position, now it becomes an elected position by the people of this. You'll always see it as like the rebellion was crushed or quelled or put down or whatever. But in reality, they just kind of gave them everything they were asking for in order for the war to end. So I don't really feel like that's a loss.
Yeah.
So that all happens. And so there's peace in Brazil again. And Brazil starts sending actually money to help the Montevideo government. They send money and people to help Montevideo because they don't like the Argentinians.
Okay. The enemy of my enemy is okay.
Exactly. And so then a year after this, in 1846, there's two big battles that are taking place during this siege of Montevideo. One is the Battle of Cerro, and the other is the Battle of Sant Antonio in 1846. They are large-scale battles, and the Garibaldis are in the middle of them. So Anita and Giuseppe lead cavalry charges and bayonet charges at San Antonio that defeat the Uruguayan and Argentinian side and break the siege of Montevideo. Or at least severely weaken it to the point where it's, it keeps going, but it's not nearly what it was before. So they lead these two big battles and win. And then a couple years after that Iron Duke, the Duke of Caxias, he shows up.
Yeah, him?
Yeah, he shows up with that same army he brought to Rio Grande do Sul, shows up with 16,000 guys, and the Argentinian side surrenders, and the siege is over.
Okay. Now, where are the Garibaldis in all this?
Well, they won those battles in 1846, and in 1848, they decided they weren't there to see that final battle in 1851, but I did need to close the book on that story. In 1848, there was a lot of revolution happening in Europe. They call it there were so many revolutions in Europe in 1848 that they call it the revolutions of 1848. Yeah. Something like 50 different revolutions were happening in Europe around this time. There's a lot of freedom fighters. There's a lot of people fighting for their individual liberties. There's a lot of people fighting for unifying various countries. There's a lot of nationalism, a lot of ideology, a lot of push for democracy. And
Giuseppe's from Italy, originally.
He is, and they're having some revolutions there as well.
Uh-huh.
So, after 14 years together in South America, the Garibaldis, Anita and Giuseppe, they pack up their family, and in 1848, they relocate to Italy to fight for Italian freedom.
Aha. So we're fighting for freedom on two different continents.
They call them the heroes of two worlds, or the love story of two worlds.
Oh,
and
yeah.
We will see what happens in the old world after we take a really quick break. So in 1848, Anita Garibaldi and Giuseppe Garibaldi, they arrive in Italy to take part in the revolutions of 1848. Now, when I remember being in college, there was a whole class on the revolutions of 1848. And I just remember being like, I just remember I didn't get it really, and I didn't care that much. And so this was just a time period for me that was always kind of like a oh, I don't know, this doesn't seem that exciting. But I'm going to try to explain it here in a way that is a little bit more, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't even say that I don't like certain time periods of history. Maybe that's a bad look for me.
No, but I mean, back then you didn't get it, but now you have context for it.
That's true. And now I can make it hopefully a little cooler. So the idea is...
What was going on in 1848?
You had the American Revolution, 1776. You had the French Revolution. You had traditional monarchies. Haiti, the Toussaint Louverture. You had these dictatorships, for lack of a better word, you had these monarchies that were falling and being replaced by a democratic national government. Hey, we the people, hey, let's vote for our leadership. Let's get rid of this old medieval style of doing things and create this new world with what they call it at the time is liberal ideas, which means like, hey, maybe we shouldn't determine head of state by genetics, right? Like, and a lot of people were interested in this time. A lot of people were reading about this kind of stuff, writing about this kind of stuff. There was this whole like explosion of, you have this enlightenment of this explosion of people talking about like, hey, maybe we can think for ourselves. Maybe everything in our lives shouldn't be dictated to us by the church and the king. And that was, it seems very obvious to us right now, but that was revolutionary in 1848, and people liked it and they were excited about it and they wanted to fight for it. And the kings and the emperors, they were paying up bills for the army, and the army was powerful and was being told to put these rebellions down. And this was like kind of a huge amount of social upheaval for freedom of speech and democracy. And there was fighting all over Europe at this time. And Giuseppe Garibaldi and Anita Garibaldi, they wanted to be right in the middle of it.
In Italy.
So Garibaldi arrives, and he's a huge hero in Italy, even before he gets there. He had kind of fought in this one little mutiny and then lost and then left for South America. But the news of what he was doing in South America. They're writing newspaper articles about him. They're writing, Victor Hugo's writing about him. Alexander Dumas is writing about him. Charles Dickens is writing about him.
Victor Hugo, Alexander Dumas, like the famous novelists?
Yes, Charles Dickens talks about him. I mean, in little letters and little posts to the newspapers or whatever. Friedrich Engels talks about him. Engels, like of Marx and Engels.
Marx and Engels. Wow. Okay.
Abraham Lincoln talks about him a little bit later. Like all these guys write very positive things about Garibaldi and his political ideas and all of this. And so, he returns, and he's this big hero. He lands in Piedmont, where he had been exiled and is currently has a death warrant. Well, people hear he's there, and they're super excited, and they come join him. And Piedmont at the time it's still under Austrian control. It's the revolution in Piedmont is to have self-determination for Italians in Italy and not be dominated by the crown of Austria. And he's fighting for that. He wins his battles, but just like in Brazil, the rest of that army loses, and he has to flee. He has to escape through Switzerland because that revolution of 1848 most of the revolutions of 1848 were not successful, but this one as well. He retreats to Nice, his hometown, where he lives with Anita for a little more than a year. So they there's worse things than to spend a
Be
year
in
in
Nice.
Nice. Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Yeah.
Actually, it sounds pretty great.
Yeah. I'm sure they managed somehow. Yes.
But that
Yeah.
is not the life that this is opportunity number 2 for Anita and Giuseppe to settle down and enjoy life and live in a villa. He's famous
in some alternate timeline.
Right. In some beautiful part of the world. They could have retired in Brazil. They could have retired in Nice, in France. And now...
What do they choose to do?
Well, there's another revolution in 1849 in Italy. And so that's that. That's your answer. They connect with 80 other guys who, most of them are veterans from the Italian Legion in Montevideo in Uruguay. People who had come back with him. When he went back to join the revolution in 1848, he brought some guys with him.
Schlepped all the way across the Atlantic, and they're vibing, and they're like,
most of them Italian expats, some of them Uruguayan, some of them Brazilian nationals, but they're with him now. And they land outside Rome in 1849 with the intention of, we are going to conquer Italy and reunite it as a kingdom. Okay, you got 80 guys plus Anita plus Giuseppe plus their 4 kids.
And maybe some horses. I don't know. I feel like there's some horses involved.
You only ever see them on horseback, so it's presumably.
Anyway, okay. So 80, like, that's a lot if you're trying to plan a picnic. But if you're trying to, I don't know, conquer Italy or reunify Italy or whatever, 80 guys is not a lot. It's not a lot. Okay, so how does this go?
So what he's done is a little bit of advanced work. So the Garibaldis have contacted Victor Emmanuel II, who is the king of Sardinia.
Okay, so that's one of the islands off the coast of Italy.
It's the island, and they have some land on mainland Italy now, too, kind of like the Sicilies.
Okay, now Victor Emmanuel, he's a king.
He's a king, yeah.
Okay.
And so Garibaldi has proposed to him, like, hey, if you help me, we'll conquer Italy and you can be the king of Italy. And that seems a little strange because these people are all fighting against kings, right?
Yeah. Okay. What's his reasoning?
His reasoning is that we need to unify Italy first and then we can overthrow the king. One thing at a time.
Details.
Yeah, I can get, like, we can't take it without, we need one of these kings. We need to back one of these kings. And I'll pick the most enlightened one. And then if we can't, eventually we'll transition out of the kingship into a republic. But let's get rid of the Austrians and the French and all these other little Italian kingdoms first.
Yeah. So it's Italy first, and we'll work out the details later.
Yes.
Okay.
So Garibaldi lands with these 80 guys in 1849 and begins to march on Rome. And he's being joined along the way by some troops from Sardinia, but also regular people. When they're like, Garibaldi's in town, they're here. Like, let's go go with these people. The people of Rome, like, open the doors of the city to him.
He's got a reputation.
Yes, he's a big hero. And these people are all, think about, like, when he first met Anita Garibaldi in Santa Caterina, like, she was looking for an opportunity, but it had never presented herself, right? She, this guy is saying, like, I am here and here's your chance. Like, this is your opportunity to come fight for your country. And in 1849, they move into Rome. Now, Rome at this time, and I just love this part of the story, Rome is controlled by the Pope. The Papal States are one of the powers in Italy at the time. So Garibaldi marches on Rome because he wants to overthrow the Pope. Which
sounds weird. The Pope, the Vatican, it's not just some religious thing like, okay, let's, say our fathers and our Hail Marys. The Vatican is a real political force.
Yes. Yeah, they are. I mean, he commands armies, right? This Pope commands armies.
Yeah. When you say the papal state, emphasis is on state.
Yes. So Pope Pius IX is in town there. And when Garibaldi starts showing up to march on the Vatican, Pope Pius flees. He gets out of town. And the city welcomes Garibaldi as a hero.
Okay.
He overthrows the Pope. He overthrows the Austrians who kind of had a little bit of military presence in the city. They drive him out, and they form a government in 1849 called the Roman Republic. And the joke at the time was that it was called the Assembly of the Damned.
The Assembly of the Damned.
The Assembly of the Damned, because the Pope, after he fled town, he wrote a letter, like a really angry letter, about how mad he was about this. And he said that that creating this assembly and creating democracy in the Papal States was, quote, a monstrous act of felony made without a mask by the sponsors of the anarchic demagogy. Yeah. But hey, they formed a republic. Viva la Repubblica.
Yeah. One person's anarchic demagogy is another person's Viva la Repubblica.
Exactly. And so Garibaldi becomes the general of this army. And again, we have Anita with him at these presentations, at these battles. And they drive the Austrians out of town. The Pope complains. He asks the French to help. He asks the Spanish to help. Everybody kind of starts to send troops to help the Pope, because you just kind of got to do that. If you're Emperor Napoleon III of France, you need to have Catholic support in your country. So you need to help the Pope when he's deposed by anarchists. And the armies of Napoleon III attack, and they show up in Rome, and they try to break through in the Janiculum Hill, which is one of the 7 hills of Rome.
Yeah, it's right across the river from the historical center. Yeah. So we're on the Janiculum Hill, yeah?
Yes, and the French attack, and they are expecting to be welcomed with open arms by the...
And open arms, you mean like hugs?
Like hugs, yeah. They are expecting to be welcomed by the good Catholic Romans, who are happy to see a fellow Catholic showing up to restore the order of the Pope. But instead, what they find is a bunch of guys in red shirts with guns, and Giuseppe Garibaldi is there, and Anita Garibaldi is there, and they open fire on these French, and the French army is shocked, and they're defeated, and they run from the city. And the site of that battle on the Janiculum Hill is where there's currently a statue of Anita Garibaldi today.
The one that I saw, yeah.
The one you saw. It's where she's entombed there. That's where she's buried. And okay, great. And then there's another force sent from Italy, a different city-state in Italy, and they drive them off too. And then the French come back with a huge army, and they surround the city. The city is besieged for 30 days.
An entire month of being besieged.
Yes,
wow.
In Rome. Yeah. And the Garibaldis, they don't have enough troops to hold these French off. So they flee the city. They had a couple of options. They could try to fight their way out. They could do whatever. But they get out of there. They escape the city. And their men are with them, and they're like, "Hey, we got to disperse. We got to get on the run. Like, we're in trouble. We've lost." One of his men says to him, like, "But what about Rome?" And Garibaldi famously says, "Wherever we may be, there will be Rome. It's with us. We got to go, but we got to go now, right?" So they withdraw, they slip through the lines, they escape, and now Anita and Giuseppe are on the run from the French and the Austrians. They're escaping through the Alps. It's kind of daring and exciting. But during the escape, Anita catches malaria.
Malaria? Oh, no.
Yeah, which was a thing they had in Italy still at this time. And she gets really sick. And Giuseppe offers to take her to a hospital to get her some help. She says no, she's not going to leave him. If she goes there, she'll be arrested, and it'll be a whole thing. So no, I just want to stay with you. And on August 4th, 1849, she dies of malaria at age 27.
27.
27. Oh. She was pregnant with their 5th kid when she died. But yeah.
Oh, wow. But what a life.
Yeah, he was there with her when she died, and she passes away, and that's not the end of her story, but it will continue, and she will be. There's more to her story than this, and we're going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna finish the story of Anita Garibaldi, because there's still more to come. The Republic of Rome was defeated in 1849, and Anita Garibaldi dies while fleeing from the French and the Austrian forces that are pursuing the Garibaldi army. Giuseppe, he also has to go. The Austrians actually end up giving him and his wife passage. They didn't know she was dead, but they give him and his wife passage to North America. They're like, hey, just get out of town and just stop bothering us. So he goes to New York City for a little while. He goes to South America for a little while. In New York City, he worked as a candle maker, apparently in the same factory as an Italian guy who may have also invented the telephone around the same time as Bell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay, so he's off, and there's good indication that he's really, I mean, he writes about Anita often, right? And even when he's in South America, he finds the widow of Simon Bolivar and spends some time with her. I think because she reminded him of Anita. But then 10 years later, there's another revolution in Italy, and Giuseppe has to go back for it. Yeah. And this time their son.
That's his thing. That's his specialty.
Yeah. He's going to go help this revolution. He never gave up on the hope of unified Italy. And he returns. This time, instead of 80 guys, he's got 1,000 guys with him. And they land in Palermo or outside Palermo in Sicily. And one of those 1,000 guys with him is his son with Anita. Minotti Garibaldi is there. He's a soldier now. He's older. He's in the army.
This is the kid that Anita Garibaldi was carrying when she was escaping on horseback and got to that house. And then she gave birth, and then they were surrounded by those guys.
And she escaped that house with them, and then she drove all those cattle with them. He's here, and he's an officer in this army.
Hey, Minotti also, he's all grown up. Yeah.
He's all grown up. He's ready to fight for freedom, just like his mom and his daddy. And he does. So they land in Palermo. They come outside the city. It's Giuseppe Garibaldi. He says, Giuseppe Garibaldi's here. Everybody in the Sicilian king has all of his soldiers up on the walls, and the people of Sicily are like, it's Garibaldi, he's awesome. And they open the doors and they take the guns away from the soldiers, and Garibaldi just starts marching through Italy. And what you said earlier about it's hard to take Italy with 80 guys. He showed up with 1,000, and it's one of these rare occasions that the more he marched through Italy, the bigger his army got. Anytime somebody wanted to fight him, he'd defeat them, but just everywhere he went, like a Pied Piper kind of thing, everywhere he went, people showed up to join his army and help him fight. And in 1860, he completes his mission. He unifies Italy as a country. And,
he does.
And it stays that way forever, or at least up to this point. But he never forgot about Anita. There's stories of him being like kind of a womanizer later on in life or whatever. But like he writes about Anita all the time, and it was very clear that she was his love, and that was something that he thought about all the time. Minotti becomes one of his top generals later on in life.
So, that son, that kid.
Yeah. He becomes an Italian politician in the Italian government, which is kind of cool. He joins a revolution to help Poland fight the Russians in 1863. And he was a brigade commander during the Franco-Prussian War. But yeah, he's an Italian politician. And Anita's entombed in Rome, where that statue you saw was. She is a national hero in Brazil and in Uruguay and in Italy.
Three different countries.
Three wildly different countries with an ocean separating them. They call her the heroine of two worlds. And, there's patriotic songs about her in all three countries in three different languages, right? There's patriotic songs about her in Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian. They did a movie about her in Italy called The Red Shirts, Camicie Rossi. It's
Camicie Rossi,
I'm pronouncing it like it's Portuguese. Camicie Rossi. And she's played by Anna Magnani, who was the first Italian woman to ever receive an Academy Award, and the first non-English speaking woman to receive the Academy Award.
Okay, good job, Anna Magnani. Okay.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of famous Brazilian TV shows and movies about her.
I'm sure,
yeah, there's a bunch. Casa de Sete Mulheres, the House of Seven Women, that's the one that like everybody knows, and it's from 2003, very famous. But yeah, Anita Garibaldi, she's a national hero in 3 countries. That doesn't happen very often. She was a cowgirl from the interior of southern Brazil, and she ended up being, this war hero in several battles. She fought for Italian independence. She fought for Brazilian independence. She fought against she fought for the Uruguayans, and on land and at sea, cavalry, bayonet charges, cannonballs, everything you can think of, daring escapes, riding on horseback, fighting for her family and her home and her people and her beliefs in creating a better world that was free from kings and emperors and totalitarianism. So that's Anita Garibaldi. I think it's a pretty good story, and I'm glad that you guys stuck with us for both parts of this show. So thank you so much, as always, for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Stay badass.
Badass of the Week is an iHeartRadio podcast produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are Andrew Jacobs, me, Pat Larish, and my co-host, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and Ben. Story editing is by Ian Jacobs, Brandon Phibbs. Mixing and music and sound design is by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeart. Badass of the Week is based on the website badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions, ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like the podcast, subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and your enemies if you want, as we'll be back next week with another one. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.